Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Future Tech podcast series. It's me, Charlie Sell, the Group MD of Arrows Group. And this is a podcast where I speak to thought leaders, industry experts, asking them, first of all, about their story, then about what they're really passionate about, and always finishing on that career advice for many of our listeners. Now, today is quite a special and unique podcast. We're going to be hearing the story of Angela Thomas, and Angela is probably one of the most inspiring people I can honestly say I've met, from the journey that she has been on to where she is today as a leading strategy and transformation specialist. Angela has worked for companies like Channel 4, Deloitte. She's going to explain a bit more about where she is today, but how she got there is the real crux of this podcast, and it's quite an eye-opening story. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Angela, and she's going to talk about her story. So, Angela, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm humbled and I'm excited also at the same time.
Fantastic. Well, let's just jump straight into it. If you wouldn't mind talking to us about where you were at the beginning of your journey and how you've come through to where you are today.
Yeah, so just to give context, I am first generation from Jamaican parents. They came in the 60s, early 60s, and I'm here today as first generation. Very strong Christian Pentecostal roots. So not so much my father, even though my grandfather was quite strong in the church, but my mother in particular was very instrumental in being a founding member of one of the Pentecostal church movements here in South London. So she's now passed, but her legacy lives on through us. So we have a really strong Christian background and faith, and so I was really brought up in that. So to experience the domestic abuse and the domestic violence that I then went on to experience, being not just being in church, because it's not about being in church per se, it's about having that relationship with God and then experiencing all this adversity. It really didn't make sense at the time, but looking back I can say that as I said to you previously, I think someone like myself, it's not only me but people in this space or who have gone through certain levels of adversity are entrusted with that, because they will come out on the other side and bring people through in whatever means and measure. So I brought up in church, very strong Christian foundations, had aspirations as a young woman growing up to be married and what have you. And I suppose I had some insecurities as a child that was never dealt with. So I was a big child. And so I always was just seeking for love. Unfortunately, my parents didn't stay together. So I had to deal with that. So they divorced when I wasn't so young at that stage, but the separation certainly happened when I was young. And I really pined for my father. So growing up as a young woman, I really just wanted to be married. I wanted that affirmation that somebody loved me and blah, blah, blah. And that led me to make wrong decisions where relationships were concerned. So I'm cutting a whole long story short to say I eventually got married. And when I did get married, even before the marriage, there were things you could see that really were red flags, but I chose to ignore them because I have a redeeming quality. So I think I can change them. Love can change everything. So I'm going in with, to a degree, my eyes are kind of open, but I've got this kind of savior mentality that I can turn things around and blah blah blah. But what I actually discovered is, number one, if you don't love yourself, if you're not confident or embrace who you are, getting into any relationship, and certainly getting into marriage, is just going to make that 10 times worse. It's just going to make that extreme. And that's exactly what I found. It wasn't too long after we got married that, I was then physically being abused. Um, and it didn't even make sense, the abuse, to be fair. It just did not make sense. There was no event or steps that I could say, because I did this, then that triggered that. It just came from nowhere. So I was constantly living on eggshells. And at that stage, I was working in local authority and, you know, doing what I was doing as an admin officer in housing and in education first and then housing. And then the abuse got worse. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, it was mental, it was talking down to me, saying I would never be anything, saying that you know, I can't speak, I can't amount to anything. So even doing this platform today, that's even like, oh wow, because I was told you can't speak, you don't make sense, when you open your mouth nobody understands you, you're an idiot. So I really was taking that all on. Then I'm dealing with church and my Christian walk, because, you know, I'm supposed to be, you know, a person of faith, and do things like that really happen to people of faith? And so it was a real oxymoron in parts, because I was trying to put the best outside, because in all of this I wasn't saying anything publicly, I was suffering in silence. So I was actually turning up to church with bruises, but well hidden under long dresses and hats, and glasses to a degree, because, you know, if I was, you know, if I had bruises on my face, and put on heavy makeup. Mac was my friend in so many ways. And so, you know, able to dress that up and, you know, straighten up at the church door and walked in and praised God, and then came home, or had that kind of real descending feeling going home to, because I know what I'm going home to. In all of this, I fell pregnant. Kind of, a whole long story short, I suffered real bad abuse during the pregnancy. So where my second child was concerned, I nearly lost him in the pregnancy. And the actual breaking point came when my ex-husband, as he is now, then took a butcher's knife and was coming after me to, you know, stab me. Remember, now I'm heavily pregnant. So he's going to stab me and probably not only harm me, maybe even seek to kill me, but the child would be harmed as well. I had another son who was about 5 going on 6, and he was abused as well, especially mentally. You know, there was a lot for him to deal with mentally. And so when that episode happened, I actually ran away from my own home, because when I got married, I had my own place, and he came into the home. But that episode, I ran away with a very small suitcase, and ran away with the heavy pregnancy and my young son, and slept on floors. Um, because I just couldn't face going back home. I was scared. My family then got involved, because as I said, if you remember, I didn't really say anything, even though I think they knew that, but I never said anything. I always tried to put the best outside. Cut a long story short, you know, I eventually returned back to my house, but it it was a near 20-year journey, because where I am now started at that point, that breaking point where I lost my job in local government as an admin officer in housing at that point. I lost my house. I lost everything. You know, that I I couldn't even relate to friends, because I felt so ashamed and what have you. I now had my second son, so I had 2 children. I had no money. I spent everything, lost everything, and even to go on benefits was a real big thing for me, because it's a kind of pride thing. So I wasn't even doing benefits. I was just trying to make ends meet. And so I remember going to Tesco and weighing up Happy Shopper beans compared to the Tesco brand, looking at how many grams was in each to see which one would give me more beans, for instance. It was that kind of hand to mouth living. And it's not because, you know, maybe my family might come across this podcast at some point, it wasn't because they weren't there. It's because I just didn't really share as much. And to be quite honest, they had my mum, you know, she was a single parent anyway, and she had some health challenges. My mum was phenomenal, my biggest role model. My brother, also phenomenal, but they can only help you to a degree. I have 2 children. So my biggest why was to get myself back into employment and do something that would give me money big time, not just in West Indian speak, small. I needed something that really put a roof over our heads, gave us food, put clothes on our backs and what have you. So I met someone who introduced me to test analysis and was talking to me about this. And basically, Charlie, my journey in this strategy and transformation started there by just doing tabletop learning. And I mean tabletop learning, literally reading up on whatever Google was at that stage, because I'm talking about nearly 20 years ago. Google was no way the presence that it is today. So whatever I could find to research testing and the test steps and V model and waterfall and what, it meant absolutely nothing to me. But I, you know, tabletop learning, trying to get myself in. And then I structured a CV for myself based on the little that I could take away, and looked at what I had done previously and kind of made it applicable to a test analysis. I knew nothing about this world, but I need to get work. I have no money. And I kept on applying through JobServe. JobServe was like, you know, people do social media like Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram. I was constantly on JobServe. That was my thing. I was just sending out all these CVs constantly. And I was like applying for anything that remotely looked like what I knew a little about. Just thinking, as if I could just get in the door, I will do my best to soak up everything and just learn as I go, learn as I go, learn as I go. And somebody, I won't say the organization, but it's a huge financial organization, took a punt on me, which they didn't even know they were taking a punt on me. They offered me a 4-week contract. And at that stage, thankfully, there was no IR35. So £250 per day for me nearly 20 years ago, that was phenomenal. 4 weeks, it was like, okay, it's 4 weeks. At least I'll get some work experience. I'll take that. And I remember going the first day, and they made me start on a Friday, I think it was. And I was like, that's really strange. But I was just grateful. It was £250 in my pocket. So I started on the Friday, and I remember being at the desk, and they were just throwing all these test things at me. And I thought, I don't know the hell what this is, but I'm just going to make a note. And when I go home over the weekend, I'm just going to be just reviewing all this stuff. What's black box testing? What is that? What in the hell is that? I don't know. And, you know, I kind of preed myself up over the weekend and went back in on the Monday. And you know that, you know, I made mistakes, but I quickly learned from them. And then that 4-week contract then turned into 3 months, then turned into 6 months, and then turned into a year. And by the end of that contract, I was there for nearly 2 years. I actually managed the test team. This is somebody who knew nothing about this world. But what that showed me was, you know, the adversity and the why, the big why, the 2 children, putting a roof over our heads, getting food on our table. That was the driving factor. I needed to keep at it. So even when I had terrible days when I really messed up, I was ashamed, and you know, it takes much to go back in and face the music, so to speak. But I did. But I left that contract being, you know, test team manager, managing test team, but then also realizing I actually get bored with this now. I love breaking the systems. I want to do business analysis. So I started to shadow people and sit in on meetings and just do all this business analysis stuff and just supported all the work. So I was managing the test team and doing all the test stuff, but then started to angle for the business analysis. And then I did another tabletop thing for business analysis. But I did it, and then I have to say I did all the ICEP stuff afterwards, but all the tabletop stuff came first because I needed to get in there. So business analysis would give me more money, and now my children were wearing, it's not that I'm not going to say that we were in, you know, secondhand clothing, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not here saying that. Well, my family ensured that the children and myself had enough clothing and what have you, but I was now able to go out and buy my son a Game Boy, my eldest son. That was a big thing. We were able to go and look at Nike and Adidas and things like that. Now, they were only young, but imagine at that age, they were still picking out Nike and Adidas. They didn't want Shoe Zone stuff. It's just amazing. But anyway, so I did the whole tabletop business analysis, and shout out to all the people that helped me all along the way. They'll remain nameless for this podcast, but again, that was another experience. Again, lots of self-learning through whatever Google was at that stage. And then, as I said, I went and did the ICEB stuff afterwards. And then I stumbled into project management because really, if you know anything about me, I am a born organizer. I'm a strategist. I'm visionary. And I think that comes as part and parcel of being a mum in a way, because you have to preempt things. You can't wait until something happens. You have to preempt it. And so I applied all of that and then stumbled into project management. And, it wasn't so tabletop at that stage, but I was doing more life experience, learning, shadowing people, making mistakes, but learning from them. And I should say, throughout all these steps, I'm reworking my CV, and I'm making out this person who, when I look at my CV, it's like, who's that? But it was me. But I needed to really market myself. I learned to understand that what the buzz was of the current time. So I remember when I was doing the test team, the buzz thing at that stage was all this agile thing coming through. So there was a lot about Scrum. What was Scrum? Isn't that a rugby thing? No, Scrum is actually, so I actually assigned myself to a Scrum Master and learned all about Scrum. Then I went on to learn about XP. And so the whole learning process for me, one of the things I really want to bring out from this is that it's so unconventional. Someone like me who's not a graduate, who's not in their early 20s. When I was experiencing all the domestic violence, I was in my 30s. And all that learning was as a single mom with all this, there was a lot of rubbish going inside my head about who I was, but just that why factor, just I had to keep going. I had to keep going. I had to keep going. And so that was the driving force. So I had to learn. I had this eagerness to really develop my skills, but it pandered to things that were inherent that I really didn't know that I had. So now, looking back on what I've done, I've worked with Direct Line Group. I've worked with EDF Energy on global transformation programs. I've worked with Marks and Spencer. I've worked with so many big organizations. I've taken such big learning from these places. But when I look back now at the journey, it was totally unconventional, totally ass about face, because I went and did the learning after, like the whole theory side of it. And I remember doing the theory thinking, that ain't it. It doesn't go like that. No, nah. I can tell you, nah. But this is what you're saying, so I'll have to learn it. And I remember flunking Prince too, because it's like, none of these answers are right, but it's because I had the work experience, but the theory didn't actually apply. I mean, I went on to actually get it in the end, but the whole point I'm trying to say here is everything I did was unconventional. And one of the things that you and I certainly spoke about when we first spoke was there's a lot of energy being channeled towards young people and you know their development, and rightly so, because I've got two young sons now. Thankfully, you know, their journey has been great. So if I'm going to talk about a success criteria, it would be them. I'm not looking at myself to say, you've done it, girl. No. I just look at those two, the fact that one's now a senior on-site engineer working for one of the top media companies, and the other one is an apprentice PM. That is a testament to all the hard slog and everything they've seen me go through. So at this point, I can take off my glasses and probably shed a tear here, because that for me is the biggest success point. And I'm so proud. I'm so grateful to God for the journey, because now I can look back. And it's funny, I didn't have time to really, at that time, address the emotional needs that I had and the mental ones. It was just all about doing, just getting food on the table, roof over our heads, and you know, just doing. In recent years, I've had time to look at that side of myself. You know, what's those propensities about? So having said that, I've, you know, it's been a long, near 20-year journey. And in recent years, I've started to think about putting back. And so there's a program that I've really developed around that whole madness that I've just talked to, that I really am trying to stand up next year. The pandemic kind of put brakes on it to a degree, and everyone went through real exceptional circumstances. Everyone had a story about the pandemic, but certainly it put a break on what I wanted to do. And I even went through some stuff in the pandemic that I had to revisit. But what I would like to say to people who are looking at this podcast, if they've lasted this long, is that you certainly don't have to be a graduate. You certainly don't have to have all the degrees like a thermometer. You really can make it just through self-learning, but you have to be determined. You have to be disciplined. And those are the things that, because I remember as a mom, single mom, when they were younger, I would have to take care of them, but then have time set aside to be reviewing the day that I had. What were the things that I came across today that I didn't quite understand? What could I have done better? What's out there that I can take from? And then that's what I constantly did every day, and just applied that learning. I also went on, when I was at work, was looking at where I would aspire to be, and then really met with those people, worked along with those people, sought ways to support them in what they were doing. And I was learning all the time, learning all the time. So my management style now is so about a nurturing, it's coaching, it's mentoring, but there's such a nurture aspect to it, because if when I was going through what I was going through, I needed somebody to be there like that. Everything that I've talked to you about is things I've stumbled into. There was no strategy there. There was no set plan. It was just things that God allowed me to stumble into. So I would love to do a program that formalizes that whole journey, makes it more structured. I've taken all the knocks so you don't have to. So whether you be a woman or a man, so I certainly on LinkedIn put out a post about domestic violence and what I wanted to do. And I did make a point of saying it's not just targeted to women. Men, you know, are willing to work with men and organizations that deal with men. And it was really surprising the amount of men that responded to that, to say how they had been beaten on by their wives or their partners. It was amazing. So whatever I'm doing, I'm not, you know, I want it to be really applicable to everyone, but more so to my generation, my age, because as I said, there is an awful lot of energy put on our young people. And as I said, rightly so. They are the people of today and tomorrow. But we are in danger of losing my generation, because we can get to a place where we feel like, okay, especially through the pandemic, I used to work in a shop, and the business has closed down. What can I do? My journey says, okay, the council shut down to me with the admin work I was doing. And I just started to just, um, I suppose you have to find, what is it that you pander to? What's your passion? And I always had a thing about unpicking problems, maybe because my life was so chaotic, I don't know. So, if, I had something that pandered to just always being under the bonnet and just fixing and driving and getting an end result. And the testing and the business analysis, I didn't appreciate it at the time, but it certainly worked that skill out of me. That was always there. But those irritants actually brought that pearl out of me without me even really knowing. So I really want to do something about my generation, like the 40s and 50s, even the 60s, who feel like, there's nothing really there for me to do. They can't retire because, their money's all spent. Um, they don't feel like they have any skills. No, what I'm here to tell you, you've got transferable skills. If you're a parent, you can take those parent skills like I did and transfer them into a professional setting and be successful. So hopefully I've not lost the audience here.
No, and Angela,
But
you really, really haven't, and that story, as I said at the beginning, is just one of the most inspiring stories I've heard, and I've been writing down these little Tippet notes of so much good stuff that you've said, and some of the notes I've taken, thinking about. I totally agree with you that actually age should not be a barrier to people being able
yeah,
to relearn, reskill, and to have the confidence to take the plunge. And there's something that's even more inspiring about what you talk so authentically around that belief that let's just get in there and do it and learn on the job and be fearless in that. And
yeah,
ironically, a big thing that we do as a business is that's a mentality that normally sits with a white male. That doesn't normally sit with a female of different background or what have you, but it should, because actually that's exactly what we need to do. We need to be fearless and put ourselves out there and go for it. And the fact that that's so naturally ingrained in you and that's what you did, and that's how you've got where you've got to so many of our listeners, if they're in that same position, whether you are a graduate all the way through to someone in their as you said, late 60s, not wanting to retire, go for it. Go for it
yeah.
and learn and
Just go
absorb.
for it. Can I just say to you that, we are still just about in Black History Month, but I've never ever used the fact that I'm Black and a female as being an issue.
Mm.
It I'm not saying it wasn't there, but I never made it an issue. To me, it was a stepping stone. You tell me I can't do it, I'm going to show you that I can. And it wasn't like a kind of no thing when I got there. It's just that that's on you. That is all on you. And so I've never really made it an issue, my color and the fact that I'm a female. My faith in God is first and foremost. And I really have to really give God thanks, because there's times when I was so low, but just being in that place of prayer and just, okay, God, I need your strength to lift me to go forward. The fact that I've also got those two boys, they put me through the ringer, and that's a different podcast. That is a completely different podcast. They tested my faith to the limit. There were times when I thought to myself, I don't know, God, because I really want to beat the hell out of them, but you know what, I came through, they came through, and we're still going through. I'm not even here saying that I'm the finished article. In all of this journey, my credit was so jacked up. I still have to deal with some rubbish to deal with that. But, God has always allowed me to find a way. You give me a blocker, there's a way, there's a way, there's a way, there's a way. So even things that maybe I shouldn't have applied for, I applied for. What are you going to do? Tell me yes or no. Simple.
Yeah.
If it's no, it's not even so much about rejection. It's just a direction. That's not the door that I should enter. Then I need to go somewhere else. So I really want to be the person that celebrates the unconventional, because we are very good at celebrating masters and doctorates and degrees and all that kind of stuff. We're not really good at celebrating just the fact that you made it. You made it. You're breathing, you're here. There's another chance to turn it around. So I want to be that person, and I'd love to do something with Arrows to do that. So I'm sure that we will.
And 100% we will, because as I say, and from I'm convinced many of our listeners will be listening to this to the very end, because that you captivated me in the first half part of our podcast, where as I said, there are so many life lessons to take from what someone who's brave enough like you to be able to talk about. And much of that will resonate, different parts of it, with many different people, all the way from the real extremes of domestic abuse, but actually all the way through to how I can do a career change, or how I can build relationships or learn, because you other things I noted. You must have built relationships with the Scrum Master to shadow them. You must have built relationships with the team members to become the test team manager. That ability to say, well, actually, it's once I get in somewhere, I'm going to make the most of that opportunity, and I'm going to learn, and that is relevant to society, not just specific groups. So Angela, look, that time has flown by. That's and again, people who regularly listen to the podcast, if there is that group there, they know I like to sort of contribute quite a bit to the podcasts, and this one I just wanted to listen. I was totally in awe. So for me, a massive thank you for sharing your story.
No, thank you for inviting me. Thank you very much. And as I said, I really look forward to what we can do to make this happen.
And this is the start of our journey together. I'm convinced of that.
Yeah.
So
me too.
Brilliant. So to our listeners, thank you very much. That's another episode of our Future Tech podcast. As many of you know, the podcast is embedded across our 33 university partners. It's also on our Spotify channel and on our landing page, arrowspodcasts.com. So for now, it's a massive thank you from me and to Angela. Angela, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
And to all our listeners, this is another episode of Future Tech. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Future Tech with Charlie Sell, a podcast from Arrows Group Global. Please subscribe to this podcast so that you never miss an episode. Arrows Group is a global technology recruitment and workforce solutions provider who focus on people at the heart of all our interactions. With in-depth technology expertise and global candidate communities, we offer bespoke solutions to every client and candidate. To find out more, visit arrowsgroup.com.